Today we're going to talk a little bit about kindness, showing kindness to others. We're going to be using a more obscure section of the word. It's a story between David and a person called Mephibosheth. I'm Pastor Krause, coming to you from Christ Lutheran Church in Pewaukee. Real glad to be with you today. I serve as the senior pastor here. We have satellites in the city of Wauwatosa and also in the town of Erin. Once again, we're talking about kindness, and this is a more obscure story. It is the story of David, and part of the court history of David that's given to us in this bigger section of the Word, which is in 2 Samuel, the 9th chapter. It is the story first that begins with the kindness, the friendship between David and Jonathan. Very profound friendship, deep friendship, and it was a contested friendship in this that Jonathan was the son of Saul. Saul was the king, but God had chosen David to succeed him. There was a lot of jealousy on the part of Saul. People were flocking to David. And one of those people was Jonathan. Jonathan becomes this very close and trusted friend of David. Jonathan's caught in the middle. And then a terrible thing happens during the time of war, that King Saul is in this battle against the Philistines, and then there is Jonathan as well, and they're both killed in battle. Oh, Israel to a great degree is decimated, humiliated. And then there was a son of Jonathan. His name was Mephibosheth, and he was there at the battle. He was 5 years old, and there was a woman there, a servant woman, and she was to take care of Mephibosheth. And she sees what's happening out there on the battlefield, and she runs for her life. She's carrying this 5-year-old, and she trips and falls, and there's a terrible accident. And Mephibosheth has both of his feet crushed or hurt to the point where he is a lifelong cripple. He can't walk. He needs assistance. He needs help. And now it's a later time in the history of King David, and he says, who's left from the line of Jonathan, this one that I so loved and cared about? And the closest relative that is there is this Mephibosheth. And David chooses to show kindness to this Mephibosheth. He should be brought to him. And what does King David do for Mephibosheth? The first thing he does is restores all the lands of his grandfather Saul. Those are your lands. They rightfully now belong to you, no matter who owns them. And that was not the only thing that was done for Mephibosheth. Then King David says, I want you to eat at my table for the rest of your life. I want you to be in the inner circle. I want you to not just have great food, but you're part of the inner circle of the king's court. You're there. Now, showing kindness, like when we show kindness, we don't always know what is going to be reciprocated. Eventually, David had to flee for his life because of insurgency in the kingdom. And Mephibosheth does not come along. Why didn't he come along? Well, he was lame. Maybe that was the reason. He would have needed help to flee. He couldn't leave on his own. He stays there back in Jerusalem when David had fled. What happens? Well, eventually David is returned. And why did Mephibosheth stay where he was? Some say he had a servant who helped to take care of the family matters, Ziba. And Ziba says, the reason he stayed is because he wanted to be put on the throne. If they deposed you, David, then maybe they'd take Mephibosheth and put him on the throne because he comes from a kingly line. Saul, we don't begin to understand that as Americans, but plenty of countries around the world do understand that. They're looking for a person who could be put on the throne. And that's the reason he stayed there. But later on, when David pursues the truth, I guess you don't really know what is truthful. He has one person's word against another, just like I as a pastor or you as an individual. The husband says this, the wife says that, the father says this, the son says that, the mother says this, the daughter says that. I don't always know who's telling the truth. And so it was left somewhat in the middle. But the point here, I think, is that we are to be people who show kindness. And maybe kindness to a family, maybe kindness to a person. And don't ever waver in that kindness. Well, you don't know what necessarily is going to be reciprocated in this sinful world, but don't ever give up, huh? Because our model is Jesus. Jesus shows kindness to us. He does it day in and day out. Sometimes we are wayward. Sometimes we seem to run the other direction. But Jesus has shown kindness to us. And so we are to show kindness. Now I'm going to read to you this story. Once again, it's taken from 2 Samuel chapter 9. We're going to be reading 11 verses. David asked, "Is there anyone still left of the house of Saul to whom I can show kindness for Jonathan's sake?" Now there was a servant of Saul's household called Ziba. They summoned him to appear before David, and the king said to him, "Are you Ziba?" "At your service," he replied. The king asked, "Is there no one still alive from the house of Saul to whom I can show God's kindness?" Ziba answered the king, "There is still a son of Jonathan. He is lame in both feet." "Where is he?" the king asked. Ziba answered, "He is at the house of Machir, son of Ammiel, in Lo-debar." So King David had him brought from Lo-debar, from the house of Machir, son of Ammiel. When Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, came to David, he bowed down to pay him honor. David said, "Mephibosheth." "At your service," he replied. "Don't be afraid," David said to him, "for I will surely show you kindness for the sake of your father Jonathan. I will restore to you all the land that belonged to your grandfather Saul, and you will always eat at my table." Mephibosheth bowed down and said, "What is your servant that you should notice a dead dog like me?" Then the king summoned Ziba, Saul's steward, and said to him, "I have given your master's grandson everything that belonged to Saul and his family. You and your sons and your servants are to farm the land for him and bring in the crops so that your master's grandson may be provided for. And Mephibosheth's grandson of your master will always eat at my table." Now Ziba had 15 sons and 20 servants. Then Ziba said to the king, "Your servant will do whatever my lord the king commands his servant to do." So Mephibosheth ate at David's table like one of the king's sons. The word of the Lord.